This is Rick Jacobs of Law Enforcement Training and Education Consultants. And tonight we're going to have part two, Bryan Williams on to talk about admin side of making change in an agency or in training. He also just recently did here he is, give me a second. Audio cuts out when I invite people in. So give us a real quick second. All right. We have Jamie and we have Bryan joining, and pretty soon we're going to have David Mahula also popping in. And I'm excited for this part two. So, real quick, Bryan, thank you for popping in again tonight and taking part in this format that we're doing. I wanted to say that Bill Forster is not going to be with us tonight. He is under the weather, and I'm wearing his T-shirt in homage, so he's with us. And so, yeah.
Cool. I hope he feels better.
Yeah, absolutely. His whole family is down, so his daughter brought home the gunge from school apparently, and
Yeah,
we all know how that is.
yeah, I do.
Hey, Bryan, it's good to meet you. Sorry I couldn't
Nice
be on the
meeting
last
you.
one, but I'm glad to finally talk to you and meet you. So
Yeah, nice
it'll be a
meeting
good
you,
one.
man.
And Jamie's daughter does wrestling, and apparently she's kicking a lot of butt in Arizona. So
Yeah,
we
there's a
got a
state
proud
tournament all
daddy
day
moment
today.
here.
Yeah, state tournament all day today. So just barely walked in the door.
Oh, wow. Wow.
That's awesome. Oh, here comes David. So what we're going to talk about tonight. So Bryan's been a really active guy. He did our YouTube live marked February 6th, and then Scott Howell released his podcast with Bryan. I listened to the entirety of it, so I have a lot of questions. But also primarily this is for people who hopefully watched our YouTube live to ask questions, and questions from the YouTube live as well as the Scott Howell, the Iron Sights podcast. Any questions are valid and open. So we invite everybody to contribute. No questions yet. Jamie, you didn't have a lot of chance to talk to Bryan last time. I'm sure you have some questions that you probably have from listening to our YouTube live. I know David does. David did a lot of note taking last time, so I'm sure he's got some processed information he'd like to ask. And I talked way too much last time, so I want to be a little more quiet.
Yeah, it's been good listening to all the different things you've been on and learning from you. It's good to see a chief like you out there putting out good information for chiefs to realize, hey, we can do things a little bit different. We can do things better. We don't have to do the status quo. I'm lucky to be a part of an agency that has a chief very much like you. And I get to see the receiving end of that as well. Somebody that supports the guys, pushes for training, pushes for the guys to get better, and wants to constantly raise that standard.
That's
So
awesome.
it's good to see there's other chiefs out there continuing to do what you're doing. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for him? Anything you want to dive into?
No, I don't know. I was just going to see where it went from here.
Where it went.
Mean, I love his stance on training. Obviously, we all have that same philosophy. I love that being a grandmaster and continue to push yourself as a chief is huge. And then constantly pushing that on your guys. So obviously you talk a lot about the things you've done. How are you received as a chief? Like when you're amongst the guys, when you're out just working with them, what are some feedback that you get and some things that you get back from those guys?
I had a break after the police chief job where I was at City Hall for about a decade. And so that was interesting. So I was still relatively close to the business, but I was out of it. And then I retired in January of 24, set out for a year, and I just recently went back to work back in LE, working for a sheriff here in Central Texas. That question's, I think, with the folks that you know that know me and that I'm around, I feel like I'm taken in a positive way, but you never know those things, right? But yeah, in terms of the shooting stuff, I mean that stuff was over the course of a lot of years, and even with a break in between the two GM cards. The second one was after I got to this chief job here in Central Texas, and had some guys that were really interested in learning how to do that and taking that on as a way to get better. And so we started doing that again. And that second one took me about 5 years to get done. It was a little bit harder. But no, I think from the chief perspective, I think there's probably a couple of guys out there that that shoot at that level, not many. And I think that's where Brandon up in Region 7 coined the unicorn chief thing. I didn't come up with that. It just stuck with me. It's silly, but it is what it is. And it has definitely stuck. But beyond that, yeah, I'm not real sure where I was going with that. But
Let me ask you this. So
yeah,
obviously there's always a small percentage of guys that want to push and want to get better in the department. And
yeah.
then you have the guys in the middle, they're just happy to be there. And then you got guys that are just, we all know that probably
No, I
shouldn't
know.
be there. When
Yeah.
when you're around those guys, when you're around the middle guys and the guys that
Yeah.
don't want to be there, how are you received by them, knowing that you're trying to push them to get better and they may not want to?
Yeah, I think I'm received pretty well. I think they like seeing that out on the range. Earlier this year, I don't know, I don't know, a few months of starting with the sheriff's office, we started talking about bumping up the standard on the Q course. Not a big deal, but it is what it is. I don't really anchor a whole lot to any qualification course. That's not ever really going to be
Mhm.
a standard that you want to anchor yourself to. Where we want to get is far beyond what that is. But so we wanted to make a few tweaks and a few changes to that. And of course, people get anxious with any change in that area. One of the things that I did this last year is I put on, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 level up handgun, like half day deals. And the goal was to get people that probably were a little anxious about the change, or folks that wanted the opportunity to come out and really work on some development on the skill. And I actually taught those, and so I was exposed to that on the range. And part of that too is just for them to get to see me out there in that role, and not just in an admin role, but actually being out on the range and teaching that stuff. To answer your question, I think okay. For the most part, I think I'm received okay.
I look at our chief and he's brown belt in jujitsu, has his own jujitsu gym. So he really pushes the DT stuff and
Yeah,
firearms as well, trying to push all, like just better cops in general. And so
absolutely.
he just like you said, you go out on the range, you shoot with them, you kind of show what you can do and what's possible. He
Right.
comes on the mat with us and he rolls with us, and it's cool when you can go beat up your chief on a mat or let him beat you up is what usually
Yeah.
happens on
Yeah.
the mat. And it's cool having the opportunity to do that. So I look,
Sure, absolutely. And to your point about showing what's possible, that's not really the goal for me necessarily to do that. But whatever the drill is or the string or whatever, especially when it comes to the time hacks, the 5 reload 5 or whatever it is, and there's some crazy long time attached to it, right? That's typically how it goes. And just to actually show them what is possible in that time frame, you get a lot of people where the light bulb starts to go off, and wow, that really is a crazy amount of time to do this simple skill. But just to try to encourage folks when they're out there and they're training and they're shooting, to really take it seriously and not just be there to go through the motions and do that stuff, but actually be aggressive behind the gun and shoot the gun like you intend to shoot it. And I think that's part of really where the disconnect is, that what we see on the range in terms of just your run of the mill training or a Q course does not match up with the type of shooting that we see on the street in an engagement. You've heard multiple people, different formats, talk about what on body cam in a shootout typically does not match up with the types of shooting that we expose officers to on the range. So getting them to shoot more aggressively, it's something that for the most part, most of them have never done, but they need to be walked through that.
One of the things I think about, because there's Instagram is one of those places where everyone has an opinion, whether it's valid or not. You get a lot of people who crap on competition shooting, practical shooting, stuff like that. And I think in the podcast with Iron Sights, you
Mhm.
made it very clear that your experience, because you've had OIS
Mhm.
and you have the experience, so you are one of the people that can say this is what it's like. We all see the videos, and it's something I saw even in early 2000 when I was getting involved in law enforcement firearms training, is that I never saw a video of anyone taking their time, slow as fast, getting their hits. They weren't looking at their front posts. They were looking at the bad guy and they're pulling the trigger as fast as they could. And while a lot of people poo it by saying the targets aren't shooting back, we're not focusing on realism with performance with the practical shooting. The only aspect of it is shoot as fast as you can, as accurately as you can, under pressure. That's it.
Yeah.
It that's the only part of the transference. When people are talking, I think one of the things that we miss about that is that when people miss the target in practical shooting, in real life, that missed target is a round down range that can hit an innocent, hit somebody that's not involved, hit the back, hit the good guy, hit the hostage, whatever. So it's also round accountability because people are going to shoot fast anyway.
Sure.
So might as well train them to shoot fast as accurately as they can,
Yeah.
and be accountable. They always drill into us. We have to be accountable for all your rounds, but then we shoot really slowly, which isn't true to reality.
Yeah.
All the other crap we can do with force on force training. Every training methodology has a very narrow application, and it's by stacking those narrow applications that we get the whole picture, short of shooting real humans in a gunfight as part of training.
Sure. Yeah. Going back to your accountability piece, I think that's a huge part of the culture. But I think when you start to get into the more practical level of shooting, you've got to lay the groundwork for, and some of this training to be open to making mistakes during the training so that you can learn from that. That's a piece that in the profession hasn't really been talked about for just the last few years, but that is absolutely necessary to get folks over the hump, if you will, and to learn how to assess what those mistakes mean in terms of their shooting. But and not everybody grabs onto that concept really easily because they're just so accustomed to the outcome on the target, right? They're so accustomed to walking down range and looking at that really tight pattern or that group in the center of the target. And that's cool, that's great, but that's not always what we're after. And especially from the training perspective and learning how to shoot more aggressively and faster and balancing those two. But you're never going to get there unless you push and unless you are allowed to make some mistakes along the process.
Absolutely.
We had a whole talk on here one day about making training a safe place to fail
Yeah.
and how important that is, and not being like we used to be where you're screaming and yelling at guys for having one out. No, let's push yourself, see what that limit is, and then dial it back in, whether it's on the range, whether it's on the
Yeah.
map, whether it is clearing a house or whatever. Let's let you fail. Let's let you make those mistakes so you can learn from them. Figure
Yeah.
out where your ceiling is, drop it back down, and now surpass it.
Yeah, I think I talked a little bit about this on Scott's podcast about now looking back on my training when I first got into competitive shooting is I was very execution focused almost all the time. I would make mistakes and I would have misses and all that, but I never really approached it from a learning and assessment aspect like I would today. And I actually fail a lot more in the range today in training than I did 10 years ago. But I'm also assessing that differently too. I think, as I mentioned in that podcast, even minus that, with the repetitive work that I was doing and the work in isolation, dry fire, and all that stuff, and shooting matches and coming back and testing on the range and shooting matches and all just this constant cycle of putting in work. I got pretty good. And I think I was listening to the latest podcast that Scott did. He had dropped today. It was Paul Acosta. And he had a lot of very similar talking points on his that I had in mind just in terms of the competitive shooting. It's a great tool. It's a great place to get pressure tested, to come back to the range in your training and evaluate, regroup, and go back and test it again. But I don't see that really as a vehicle for all cops to get into. I think the thinking that all cops are going to start shooting competitive shooting is not realistic, but we can get officers better than they are. But I think, in my experience, we really have to drill down into the dry fire and the work in isolation piece a lot more than what we're doing on the range, because that's what I've seen for 3 decades plus is that they can go to a lot of different training classes and they get the information. A lot of it's really good information, some of the best information that's being delivered out there today, but they're not leaving from that environment and taking the blueprint, if you will, on how to actually improve and how to train and really putting in the work. But for me, that's the piece that I really try to harp on the most in any class that I do, is just really that, hey, if you want to get good, this is the stuff you have to do. A lot of you won't do it, but look, this is what you have to do to get better than you are today. Because even after that 1 week class with a guru instructor on the range, if that's really all you're doing for that year or for 6 months and you don't put in any work in isolation, you're going to be not one bit better than you were on the last day of that class. And that's, to me, that's the missing link in all of this. It's not necessarily the information or the instruction, but it's the individual taking it upon themselves to actually put in the work on their own. And anybody that's ever achieved a high level of performance, whether whatever the endeavor is, they've done the work on their own. So
Yeah.
to me, that's the missing piece.
That's something that, again, just going off that, trying to change the culture of everything, and you've got to start at the guys teaching that culture as well. That's a big one I've been trying to do in the instructor certification courses lately. It's always surprising to see in a group of 20 would-be instructors, probably one or two of them have even been ever introduced to practical shooting concepts, which is wild. But trying to
Yeah,
change that whole piece to change the culture is a hard one.
I think I was going
Yeah.
to say the exact same thing. Like, if we do want to change that culture, yeah, you're not going to get everybody to become a
Yeah.
competitive shooter. But if you
Yeah.
get your range staff to become competitive
Yeah.
shooters and let them go out and shoot competitively and then
Yeah.
bring some of that training back. And now you're not getting guys to go to competitions, but at least you're training them instead of just standing on the line and, all right, we're going to shoot 5 rounds in 45 seconds.
Yeah.
Now we're doing some moving and shooting. And now you can show them what they are capable of
Yeah.
and not just
Yeah.
stay and shoot little tiny holes in a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big part of that. And going back to what Chief was saying too, is the getting not only, okay, now getting the instructors to understand what skill set looks like, getting them to understand how to diagnose issues, but
Mhm.
then the same concept of getting them to teach a certain way to get their students to bite off on the skill sets in isolation, the dry fire work, the allowing them to fail on the range, creating creating the environment on the range, a safe space to fail, and then understand what those failures mean, diagnosing them, and then start to
Yeah.
learn how to fix those said problems.
Yeah, I think that we've talked about this before, that we've talked about how a lot of this starts with the instructor.
Yeah.
And the problem that we have in a lot of agencies, and I think you might agree, is that we have a lot of instructors who get the certifications and are done. They don't do any further development. They don't do any further other than what they're required to. And that development could be going to a class on a 4-hour class on PowerPoint. Oh, you got your cert for the year. You're blessed as an instructor again. But I think it's going to require agencies to make it policy that to be an instructor in an agency, you have to have constant instructional development and constant instructor development relevant to what you're planning on training and relevant to being an instructor. It's like in Alephia, they have a coaching remediation course. I think every firearms instructor should be going through this kind of course where it's instructor development on how do you help train people who need remediation. I haven't seen any other courses like that. I'm sure there might be some, but it's that kind of stuff that we need to require instructors to do. But I also think that we need to start establishing the paradigm that instructors are leadership. That there's some corporations I've worked for where I've made this argument, and it was my agency. It was a big deal that if you were not an active instructor knowing how to develop people, you didn't get promoted. And I think that should be part of the component is that unless you are an active instructor, don't even bother applying for putting in for promotion. Because until you've demonstrated that you know how to build people, build development, mentor, you have no
Yeah.
business in a leadership position.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I was going to bring the mentor piece up or the coaching piece. I actually think, to me, there's a bit of a difference between somebody that's just a pure instructor and somebody that has the
Yeah.
ability to actually coach somebody to improve. That's another area where I think we could do a better better job for sure. And it's not just, hey, this is the course material that we're going over. These are the range rules, or these are the rules of the day, and this is the drill that you're doing. This is how you hold the gun. This is how all these things, but really being able to assess what's going on with a shooter and find a way to make some meaningful coaching help to any issues that they're having. And I think that it just comes from experience. And I think it's personality driven too, your ability to actually see, assess, offer good coaching help. But especially on the firearms piece, I would like to see more coaching and less red shirt firearms instructor stuff.
Yeah.
Just bouncing off that, and one of the questions I had last time with in regards to that, what do you think the likelihood of getting the licensing agency to change their standards in regards to instructors? For example, like TCOL, right? We all know that's a fairly low standard.
Yeah. That's a great question, and not just on the instructor piece, but on a couple of different
Yeah.
areas. I don't have an answer to that, and really I haven't thought much about it, but that certainly would be the starting point. I think part of the problem is that when TCO says this is the thing, it's hard for an agency to do a ton higher than that. You can do it. You're gonna have the slacker mentalities that are gonna point to that and say, yeah, the licensing agency TCO here says this is all we need to meet. But
Yeah.
great question.
It was something it was a couple of years ago. Again, when I went through my instructor course, it was complete abysmal. It was an abysmal course altogether. I think we shot 50 rounds the entire time, and then you read the manual front to back.
Yeah.
But like shortly after that, some of the guys, myself and some of the guys on my team at the time, had rewritten a lot of those things, and then we're trying to get TCOL to maybe adopt and say, hey, we're doing the work for you. Here's some guidelines on what to look for in instructors, how to train, and that type of stuff. Never got any response from it, and then they came out with the revision with some of the things we were talking about, but completely missed the point of all those things.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
Yep.
last week we talked about a little bit along those lines with Ryan Clark with what AZ Post is doing. And
Yeah.
AZ Post is doing a good job of changing some of that mentality. And that's one of the reasons why I'm jumping in over there, because I see the potential of it. And it's not just about changing their curriculum, but it's changing how we teach instructors, how we teach
Yeah.
instructors to be coaches and not instructors.
Right.
And we are making a standard for the instructor courses to where we're failing 2 to 3 to 4 people every time, because if you can't do the task, you can't teach it. And if you
Yeah.
can't teach it, you can't coach it. It's up to T. Cole, AZ Post, what other governing agencies over there to also raise the standard for themselves and be like, hey, we need to make changes at the instructor level and hold the instructors to a standard, because that's where we're failing over and over again.
Yeah, that business is a lot more complicated than just doing a 30-minute presentation in a 1-week school, whatever that looks like. It's a lot more I used to teach the TCO Farms instructors course back in the early 2000s, and I got to the point where I just didn't want to do that anymore. I really don't want to teach a week off somebody else's outline.
Yes.
And to me, it was just a frustrating thing, and I walked away from that and went and did my own thing. And on the firearms instructor side of the fence, you've got a lot of people that go to that class. That's a certification that they want to have. But people have got a lot of work to do before they're ready to run that line and actually teach a class. So it's a journey, man. And I think folks need to work under somebody that's pretty skilled in that area for a while, and where they're getting, even as an instructor, they're getting coaching and mentoring and stuff along those lines, because it is a journey. It's not anything you're going to go to a 1-week or a 2-week school, get your piece of paper, and now all of a sudden you're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, that's one of the conversations that David and I had when I started creating a basic instructor course that met TCOL requirements, but also addressed all the criticisms I had for the TCOL instructor resource guide. And I tried to marry it together and realized that you can't really teach in opposition, but we made it very clear that this course that we were putting out far exceeded TCOL requirements, and we charged more for it. And the net result is that people really appreciated the class, but They also, but other basic instructor courses just saw, well, this guy got $450 per person, so now I can charge $450 per person.
Yeah,
I don't know
right.
if I don't know if I don't know if they're teaching the same class or not. But we want to raise the standard, not the price. But
Yeah,
the idea is that the people who care about high performance are going to seek out the high performing courses. If I have 6 people in the class or 10, I only have 10 people in the class because that's as many as I know I can manage. The end.
right.
I can go up to 12 or 13 under special circumstances, but anything more than 10, you can't teach an instructor course that effectively with more than 10 people. I absolutely stand fast on that. When you have 20 people in a class, you're spending more time listening to people talk than you are instructing.
Right.
And I don't think a lot of the basic instructor courses are actually teaching what instructors do. They're based on someone's assumption of what an instructor needs to do. We had that conversation with AZ Post's general instructor course. And I think that's the biggest problem with firearms instruction is that nobody's done a performance task analysis of what exactly does a good firearms instructor do in the course of training people to do firearms. So it's all 100% based off of assumptions and assumptions made by
Yeah,
somebody who did it 15 years ago sitting in a cubicle who hasn't done it since.
yeah,
So that's how we ended up with a lot of this trash that we call training. And we ended up with a lot of the mandated stuff that's trash training. And nobody's fixing it because nobody has the will, the interest, or the will to spend money on it either, because it would be an
yeah.
expensive thing. But how much is a standard? How much is a lawsuit? How much is a citizen's life?
I think
Yeah.
it kind of goes back to what one of the Chiefs' things was that said at the last Ironsides podcast. Like, it translates over to supervisors as well. You talked about how we need guys to promote, but they don't want to. I was one of those guys. I didn't want to promote because I'd take a huge pay cut. I was going to leave the SWAT team. I was going to leave doing what I loved. But then when I left the team and I went out to training, I saw another opportunity to make those changes and to be able to not just affect a small squad. Now I have the ability to affect a lot of other people. And then I realized that it was my job. Now I pushed myself to be a really good SWAT guy my entire career and continue to get better. But now I changed roles and now I'm an instructor. So now I'm going to spend my time on how do I become a better instructor and work on that skill set. And I think that's where a lot of instructors lack. They get that certification, they think they can just go teach it, but they need to
Right.
continually improve themselves as an instructor and as a coach more than an instructor.
Yeah. Good point. Just in terms of that comment about promoting, I think that of the 3 short reels that Scott cut out of that one definitely had the most activity just in terms of comments. And
Yeah.
there was some disagreement in the mix on that. There was a lot of people that didn't care for it and had no interest in doing that. And I get it, man. Just to put some context to that, I understand it. But at the same time, it doesn't alleviate the need for good people to stand up and put their name in the hat. I've told people that pretty much my whole career is that if you want to make a different impact and help make change, then promote and help do it. And if not, it's still easy to bitch about shitty leadership, but you really have to do some soul searching on that. But yeah, that was a hot take actually out of that podcast.
Yeah. I think it applies to instructors too. Like, you
Sure
have to leave
does.
what you're doing to go teach, and then you
Yeah,
have to have a passion for it. And then what we were able to do is now you start to build an army of instructors that want to come out and be part of what
Yeah.
you're doing. Just like the
yeah,
same thing, if you get a good sergeant to promote, okay, now I want to go work with that guy as a sergeant. Now you start that mentorship, and then you start getting other people, good people to promote. And it
yeah,
all revolves around training as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's safe to say that there's no shortage of work for us to do in law enforcement to make improvements.
True.
Yeah. So one of the things that you hit on in your podcast with Scott was the promotion process and how anybody can take a test. Do
Yeah.
we really want the test takers to be the admin without any other kind of thing? If you had the magic wand and your experience with admin and all that stuff, how would you change a promotion process? And would you include a training component as part of the promotion process?
The training component is interesting because there is a piece of that involved in being at that level. But Yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact context of that piece of the podcast, but just in terms of my preference, I'm not really a fan of just test taking for promotion. I prefer a more robust assessment center where other things can be evaluated to include interviews, in basket exercises, all that crap that goes along with that. But just in terms of taking a test and picking off a list, I'm not really a huge fan of that. In the entirety of my career, for the most part, every promotion that I've gone through has been an assessment center, with the exception of the Chiefs process, and that was different than an assessment center, but in some ways it was similar, and it was certainly a lot more stressful than, say, taking a division commander assessment process. But man, I think you need to evaluate a lot of different things with somebody that's looking to promote at a high level. Uh,
Do you think that something I was always curious of? Do you think that something as simple as once you get guys into supervisory position, into those promoted position, most of them again are tests, right? But making better leadership all the way around, obviously some sort of leadership courses, which most departments never see that I've come in contact with. But even something like, I hate to use peer reviews, but even like subordinate reviews. So the
yeah,
guys that you're in charge of leading you get to evaluate you on a yearly basis on how you're doing as a supervisor, and then that could potentially have consequences for your position.
sure. Yeah, I've never seen that anywhere in law enforcement. It's possible that exists. I can tell you in the private sector that happens.
Yeah.
It certainly could change the dynamic a little bit, wouldn't it? But yeah, I think that the peer set. I've actually gone through that before. That's been interesting too. But yeah, having subordinates review you, man, I could see where that would be really interesting, funny in some ways too.
We actually just did that
Right.
in our agency.
That's awesome, man.
Really?
That's
So,
cool.
yep, we did
Wow.
it, and there was a
Wow.
survey put out, and everybody got
Yeah,
to put in, and you got to say whatever you wanted to about your boss.
Damn.
So the officers rated the sergeants rated the lieutenants
yeah.
rated the commanders, all the way down. So you had the opportunity to say whatever you wanted to.
So
I
let
don't know
me let
whatever
me
happened with it,
Yeah, let me
but
ask
I
you this. That's where I was going to go. Let me ask, what was the outcome of that? Was that just a pure roasting thing, or was there like seriously, was there value in that?
Yeah.
Because if you're the one being evaluated from that
Mhm.
level, you got to have some pretty thick skin to come out of that and say, "Hey, I need to take a deeper look at myself here on these things and maybe make some changes." The problem is not many people have the ability to do that in my experience. They take it personal, and you know what that leads to.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know it's interesting because now that I'm thinking about it again, I actually don't know what happened with it and what they did with
Yeah,
it. We just had the opportunity to, luckily, I work for a good boss right now and everything is
yeah,
good. But there's different categories and you got to rate one through five.
yeah.
I know Rick hates
Man,
Yeah.
that.
I'm really, and just in terms of the survey stuff, I think if departments do surveys and they put stuff out for people to make comments on, you better damn make sure that you listen to that stuff and show that you're applying some of the things that come up. If not, the next time you do it, you're going to have crickets. No one's going to be honest with you. Man, that's an interesting topic to me, this whole survey thing.
So my agency did that. We had for every performance evaluation, the people being evaluated would also evaluate their supervisor. The problem was is we had to rate the supervisor before we got our performance evaluations, and it wasn't entirely anonymous. So every supervisor was walking on water and the son of God, because I was honest once about my supervisor was a total trash human, and I got slammed. I got slammed in that performance evaluation. It was the year that I worked on a serial killer case. I did a whole bunch of Golden Boy Act special assignments and stuff like that. But my supervisor didn't like that. So I got hammered because he
Yeah,
did everything he could to undermine me. So if you're going to have a supervisor evaluation process, you have to make sure that it's effective in a way that people aren't terrified of telling the truth. And
right.
they can't see it before they do the performance evaluations of everybody else.
Yeah. I agree. If not, it just becomes counterproductive, and
Yeah.
it'll end up just creating more toxic behavior inside the organization. And so, with that stuff, you got to be careful with that. I think, man, I think in a lot of ways, I think high level folks, chiefs, assistant chiefs, but chiefs especially, and even people above the chief level that manage police chiefs, I think they need to do a better job of holding that level accountable. And just based on my experience of quite a few years, I don't think we hold command nearly as accountable as we tend to hold people below that. And to me, that's always been one of those things that has been a topic of importance to me. And I'm not saying that I've always did a great job of that, but I can certainly see in the profession that we just really do a shitty job of that overall.
So, Chief, follow up on that. Let me ask you this. So, how would you manage that? How would you hold the command staff accountable as a chief, depending on
Yeah.
what was going on?
I think it depends on the expectations that you set when you promote people and how often you review their performance. And that's the thing. I don't really see a lot of chiefs sitting down with command and actually talking about their performance either. It's just that's for the masses and not for the kingdom, if you will. And but I think it starts with the expectations, and I think it starts with how the chief sets the tone and the values of the organization. You need to anchor performance and behavior to those things. If not, then what are you anchoring to? Policy. Those are the guardrails, if you will, on things. But you really need to anchor that performance piece in terms of command to the values of the organization. And a lot of people say they have values in an organization. They may just be words written on a piece of paper. But to me, that's the starting point. And then when things come up, when behavior issues come up, you confront people on it and don't just let it go unnoticed or let things be unsaid. I think you have to confront those things head on right when they happen and have real honest discussions about them. If you're a lieutenant, and my expectation as a chief is that we're going to treat people with respect and with dignity and all these things, but I've got a lieutenant that's treating his unit like shit. I need to step in and fix that because that's reflecting on me as a chief, right?
Yep.
Those are the types of things that I think that we need to do a better job of. And I've been pretty vocal about that stuff for quite a few years too. So this is nothing new coming from me.
Yeah, that actually, how has it worked out for you going from chief to you have a captain's rank now, right? And in the sheriff's office you're working for,
Commander.
commander. Okay.
Yeah.
What is that? I don't know what the equivalent in rank would be.
It would be captain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How is that? Has it changed your perspective at all? Going up to the CEO of a law enforcement agency back down to that rank?
Not really. I wouldn't say that it's really all super challenging or anything, but it's the biggest difference is going from what I would call like an upper tier municipal organization. What I mean by upper tier, good tax base, good equipment, like really good cities, to county government, and that has been pretty for me. It's been a bit of an eye-opening experience, very different than what I'm used to, and so for me just getting used to that has been. I spent the better part of the year just trying to figure out how to navigate inside that world, if you will, because I don't come from that background at the county level. So it is different though.
Yeah, sheriff's office is very different from a PD.
Yeah, for
You don't
sure.
have citizens, you have constituents.
Yeah.
I remember you talking about also some of the difficulties you're having in upskilling or up gearing out SWAT teams. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
specifically with this one organization, but I'm sure you've had that experience throughout. What are some of those issues that you're seeing with like training time, equipment access, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, I think just the normal stuff. Having the scheduling work out where you can make training happen for everybody that's on the team on a routine basis. We're about to where I'm at, I think we're about to make some changes on that a little bit just to improve on that. The other piece is from my perspective and where I'm at now is just working through a very different budgeting process than what I'm familiar with in terms of just getting the equipment and the things needed to get the job done. And it's not horrible, but it could be a lot better. And I think that's one of the things that we're working on this year going into this budget cycle is how we can improve on that. At least be able to do a better job of telling the story. I think when it comes to this stuff, people are generally not that good at showing justification for things, telling a story, talking about why it's a need and not a want, if you will. That probably is the single biggest challenge that I see in my world right now.
What would you
It's
say?
very different.
I think a lot of people have the assumption that if all SWAT teams have all the best gear, have all the training they want, have all the money they want, what would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions about training a SWAT team?
Yeah, all the things that you mentioned, it's true. I think people do have that assumption, but I think what's lost is just how critical and important that work is when those folks get called out to respond to something. And I think we were having this discussion a few days ago, and from an equipment and gear perspective, they do have very specialized gear for that mission, but it's not like it's overabundant. It's for most places, it's just what they need. And until you start getting into armor assets and drones and stuff like that, just the basic gear is the basic gear. But I think people just have a lot of misconceptions in general about SWAT because they look at that as, hey, they're getting all the cool stuff and we're not getting shit. But I think agencies need to also resource out the patrol level to a very adequate level as well too, because that is first on the scene in every case. And I don't know if you guys would agree with this, but I'm definitely seeing some movement just in terms of training at the patrol and team tactic level that really is probably missing out there right now.
And I could,
That's
I could,
Jamie's bag.
yeah,
Okay, cool.
I can definitely speak to that. Being on a full time team for almost 16 years, like we got a lot of stuff and we got a
Yeah,
lot of training. We also sought out our own training, right? And
yeah,
we also took the time to push each other. And that was the group that we had. So we were constantly training because we wanted to. We made time for it, which I don't think a lot of, I'm not going to say a lot of people. There's people that don't want to do that, that look at SWAT and they're like, oh, they get everything. They get to do all this training, but you also have the opportunity to go train and you can push yourself as well.
yeah,
But one thing that I realized when I left the team is the little amount of training that patrol does get. No one focuses on them. And I think you're seeing that big push because a lot of guys are realizing, hey, patrol is the stand. If we raise the standard for patrol, we raise the standard for everybody. And if we
yeah,
give patrol more training, then they're going to be better cops on the street. It's not the SWAT guys that are gonna go save my family in a moment because my guys
yeah.
are probably working out in the gym or on the range or something. It's gonna be the patrol guy. So the patrol guy needs the most training out of everybody, and they're the one that gets it the least.
Yeah, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. I, I think it has to be the right kind of training too, not just
Agreed.
like, man,
Agreed.
we're my experience, because I know I'm not over patrol or any of that stuff, but I know that we do a pretty good job of sending folks to external training, and we approve a lot of stuff. One of the things that I've always wondered about over the years is that we farm out a lot of training. We send folks to a lot of really cool training courses and stuff, but what's a way for us to capture that as an organization when we have somebody go off to get training? And I don't know, man, maybe this kind of speaks to the instructor question a little bit too, is that we're not good at capturing and sharing that stuff back into the organization where it benefits a team or a unit
Mhm.
or really the whole organization. And it's just, I don't know what the answer is to that, but it's something that I've thought about a lot over the years.
I think too, a lot of it falls on that first line supervisor, right? And
Yeah,
not just you don't need to spend 5 hours at training. You go to your briefing before your shift starts and you got 45 minutes. Hey,
yeah,
let's search the building. Let's search the station. Let's do some dry fire.
Yeah.
Just that, let's go outside of the parking lot and let's practice high risk vehicle stops for 10 minutes. It goes
Right.
back to the whole let's train a little, a lot.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
A lot of really good supervisors that do that, and they spend, hey, let's just spend 20 minutes doing some training. Hey, it's middle of the night, we got nothing to do. Hey, let's go clear this building one more time. And so the training is available, and I think a lot of times it's those first line supervisors that are willing to make their guys better that make it
I
happen as
agree.
well.
I agree. I agree. But I think this topic and this discussion is good for people to hear and people to talk about in their own units because it is important.
And I think too, it's important for the instructors of organizations to make themselves available. Because we have supervisors that call us all the time. Hey, can you meet us for some building search? My guys want to do it for an hour before the shift starts.
Right.
Cool. I'll be there. I'm going to make it happen. Like, I may not be able to do it Tuesday, but hey, let's do it Wednesday. And the instructors need to make themselves available to go teach these guys when they want to, because cops aren't always available working shift
Right.
work. So make
Yeah.
yourselves available as an instructor.
Yeah. I agree. I agree.
You
Yeah.
know,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say one of the things that would be an easy fix for a lot of this is that people who are paid by the agency to go out and get training come back and give an after action report and then say, but it has to be people that can recognize quality training when they see it. It can't be just Joe Bob who decided he want to go get more shooting training. Sending instructors out to not just take courses, but to take courses that might fill a gap that they don't already have time to do themselves. Have them
Yeah.
go out, evaluate the training. I don't know, we have a rubric for that, Jamie. Evaluate
Mhm.
the training and come back, provide an after action report and make a recommendation. This is something that we should bring internal, and we should bring this guy specifically internal to train all of our dudes to that kind of a thing. I think that
Mhm.
would go a long way for taking a lot of the load off of agency instructors, turning them into learning professionals and turning them into consultants where they don't have to carry the full onus of all the training, but their background, their ability to research, observe, and analyze, have them go out into the field and find the high quality people that can fill gaps or advance the standards of an agency to come in and do that in house somehow.
We had an experience with that and like you said, Rick, you have to have the instructors that are on a certain level to be able to do that in and of themselves. We sent a couple of our tactics guys to a very well-known high-end CQB instructor course, and sure enough, they came back and, hey, how'd you like it? What'd you take away? They're like, nah, there's nothing in this course we can apply to what we're teaching cadets. I'm like, okay,
Can't take anything, huh?
yeah, nothing. 3-day course, and you took absolutely nothing from it that you can.
Well,
But
I
you got
think
to
I
have
think
those. You got to have those instructors that are on that same level to
I
have an
think
Yeah.
understanding of that
that
as well.
goes straight to what AZ Breacher said, right? You got guys that go to schools, or the schools get denied because we're already teaching that here, or you send guys out to schools like, yeah, it's not going to apply to what we're doing. No, there's certain
Yeah,
things that you can apply. Let's just tweak it to make it work for what we're doing here.
exactly.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys a question. What is your take, your thinking on instructor development, regardless of the topic? You can pick general topic or very specialized. I'm just curious what your thinking is on instructor development, ongoing training, or just some thoughts on that.
So I want to answer that question. We've had two people ask questions
Okay.
on screen. So let's get to that, but don't let me forget this because all three of us have opinions about that absolutely need to be heard. The
That's why I
first one
asked
is
it.
from, yeah, the first one is from Sidewinder 1577. Do you think supervisors, mainly brass level managers like lieutenants and above, should have to work a shift on the street every so often?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I don't think a lot of people do that just because everybody's it gets busy in their own mind. But yeah, I think it's important to stay connected just to see what life is like out on the street. And things change over time. If you don't experience what the real world looks like, it could be more of a challenge. But I think everybody at the brass level, just about everybody, could learn from that question. People don't do it enough. Should it be required? And it probably is required in some places, but I see no downside to that
Yeah.
at all.
My agency, the sheriff was known to show up on calls. He'd get bored or he'd want to see what's going on the street and he would show up as backup. There's
Yeah.
you get that slight chill that you see the uniform come up behind you, so you have backup. You look over your shoulder, see who it is, and it's
Yeah.
the sheriff. You're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So I hope I'm locked on. I don't know how much he's seen that I've screwed up so far, but it really showed us that he cared. And
Yeah.
we would have captains that would do the same. He led by example. Have captains that do the same, lieutenants that would do the same. Or if we were overwhelmed with calls, lieutenants would go out and take calls, or captains would take calls, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it really does a lot for morale. But I also think it helped our agency perspective that everyone from the sheriff down knew what it was like to work the road at any given time of the year.
Yeah. So I would take that a step further a little bit, and I would say that command level people that are over the training function need to step out and teach a class every once in a while too.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So
So often when it's time to promote a lieutenant, they always promote into the training lieutenant
yeah.
because everyone wants desperately to get out of that because they think all it is navigating Excel spreadsheets and that's it.
Yeah. Right.
But man, there's so much opportunity. Is I would have killed or died. Matter of fact, when I decided to go full time, that was my goal. I wanted to be the training lieutenant, which confused everybody. That's the crap one that nobody wants. I'm like, that's the most powerful freaking
Yeah.
lieutenant in the agency. They have the greatest opportunity for change.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that. Yeah. Yeah.
anybody else want to jump in on that before I go to this next question?
Yeah, go ahead.
No,
Okay.
they hit the nail on the head on that one.
Cool. The second question from Christopher Wabana. How do you navigate trying to get acceptance on getting that training whenever you have instructors are not at that caliber?
Who was that one from?
It's from Christopher Wabana,
Oh.
WBBEN.
So I've taught him in a couple classes, and he's now at an academy up north where they're like complete FUD instructors, for lack of a better term. So he knows the difference. And that was an interesting conversation I've had with him recently, is with the wealth of knowledge that's out there on the internet, he was telling me a story that even the other cadets or students are questioning what the instructors are teaching.
Yeah.
And that just makes the instructors even.
That's bad. That reminds me of 2000 training. We're 26 years after I trained, and we're still in the same boat in a lot of places. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So how would you navigate
Chief,
it?
what do you got to say about that?
Jamie, can you rephrase the question again, please?
It says, how do you navigate trying to get acceptance on getting that training whenever you have instructors that are not of the caliber?
Yeah. Yeah, man, I don't really have an answer for that other than, to me, the first order of business is to unscrew the caliber of the instructors that you have. And that needs to be the first priority. And man, I've seen all over the map on that area, from really skilled, good, solid instructors to folks that you wonder, how did they end up in this role? So I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, just because unskilled instructors is problematic.
So as leadership, as the chief, as
Yeah.
assistant chief, as commanders, when you notice those guys, what do you think the role is of the leadership when it comes to those people? Because we all see it and we all know who those instructors are that shouldn't be there, but they still get to wear that red shirt, or they still get to teach DT or whatever.
I think it depends on a lot of things, but I'll go back to my original statement: is you need to unscrew it. You have to fix that, and there's mechanisms for fixing that, whether that's replacing the person or providing a roadmap for improving in that area. But I don't.
Let me ask you.
I have to ask how that place got in that position to begin with. How are you promoting and moving people into a trainer's position? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, but
do you think that's the same thing what I'm talking about, and something I do on, like, for example, like that at alert class, right? Is start the conversation with them as a student, right? Hey, ask the hard questions and get your other fellow students. So wait a second, why are we doing the things we are the way we're doing? I hate to say the embarrassing instructor to some extent, but make them answer the hard questions that they may not have the answer to.
Yeah.
So I think there's a couple things involved here. I think one thing that Rick has talked about a lot, like training spots there should be some sort of like major test,
Yeah.
a selection process to get them there. But too often guys go there because they want to get off the street. No one else wants that training spot. So they
Yeah.
get placed in those spots and now they're the instructors. And so now they get to
Hmm.
be seen as the instructor, even though they have no experience doing it.
Yeah.
And I think one thing, going back to AZ Post, we're getting rid of a lot of instructors. We're raising the standard. If you want to be an instructor on the range, you have to pass this sort of qual that's higher than the regular qual. If you want to
Yeah.
be an instructor for high risk vehicle stops, sorry, we just got rid of all of our high risk vehicle stop instructors and started a patrol tactics course. So we got rid of all the instructors that have been the FUDs that have been doing it for a long time and didn't want to change. No, we
Yeah.
have to change it. So we're going to go a whole different direction. And I think leadership I have seen from the officer level fails to look at or fails to look at instructors and be like, they shouldn't be teaching. Why are they still in that position?
Yeah.
I think it's
Go ahead.
now just going right off that. Do you think that's something that could be further gone down into lawsuit cases, like in cases of whatever, when
failure to
training
train.
comes into question? Yeah, where finding good lawyers to ask the hard questions on what is being trained, and essentially holding the department and the instructors liable for said training.
Is that a question?
I'm just curious. Sorry,
Okay.
going down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Do you see the potential in something like that improving the standards?
Yeah. Just going back to your previous point about asking the hard questions. I mean, that's a great technique. I talked about that in the Scott podcast for city managers to start doing that to their chiefs, to start asking the hard questions. And that's just my experience. I don't see that enough. But yeah, you're going to get the same revelation and value out of that at that level too. And then to the point of, always go back to how did we get to this position where we've got a FUD or whatever in that position, and what was our process that led us to this point to begin with. And if we've got people that are not good at instructing and they're in that position, a full-time position to do that, man, the process, the machine is broke, right? Just because we have an opening and somebody wants to go park there for a few years, that should not be the prerequisite to get to that. And I don't know where this came up. It may have been in the discussion on this the first time, or it could have been a different podcast, but just the folks that go into some of these positions, whether it's SWAT, being a full-time trainer, firearms instructor at a large agency, a full-time firearms instructor. These need to be cream of the crop people, the shining examples of the agency. Now, we want that in every position, right? But you have so much impact on the effectiveness of an agency at that level, at the instructing level, that to not put more emphasis on who you're putting in those positions is just a mistake. And there's no perfect process anywhere that I'm aware of. And you're going to have people that get into positions that shouldn't be, but it should be a goal, though, in my opinion.
I think that question actually leads back into the question you asked us of
Yeah.
what I'm going to reframe it. I'm probably totally wrong because I've been distracted by all the comments and stuff. But what do we think needs to be done to improve the quality of instructor development?
Instructor development. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna let the other guys contribute first because I'm gonna talk forever about this. And I need y'all to cut me off if I get too far along. We have a couple other questions that have popped up. We're gonna get to this question first, and we're gonna go back to the comment questions. Jamie, David, you start off because I've got positions on this. We can't hear you, David.
Yeah, for sure. There needs to be something along the lines of instructor development to keep that training going forward. We get stuck in this bubble and there's no change.
Yeah.
The guys when I went to the academy versus by the time 15 years later I went to the training academy to be an instructor, the curriculum had barely changed at all, which is wild. But without making it mandatory, to do. I think it's going to be hard to get guys to bite off on wanting to go to something like that unless, again, they get some sort of, I don't know, certificate or something like that out of it. Say, here's another certification in my book to show them that stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a hard
I
one.
think I think a lot of it falls back on the instructor. If you're an instructor, you have to be a student first. And if you want to be
Yeah.
a good instructor, you constantly have to be going out and learning. Even if you've done a skill set for a long time, go to outside schools and continue to learn what is out there because things change. David just said the curriculum doesn't change in law enforcement ever. I've got when I went through training, I actually just had to do some training and they gave me the PowerPoint and it was 157 slides long and I was like, are you kidding me right now? And so I cut it down to 18 and like that needs to happen more. We have to evaluate our own training. We have to be willing to change it. We have to be willing to understand that things change. And then also I think it falls on the supervisor level. And if trainers aren't putting in the work to get better, or we notice that they aren't a very good instructor, then it becomes on the supervisor to be like, hey, this isn't a spot for you. You should probably find somewhere else.
Just I had something pop in my head here. So, just from not internal to the agency, but as an outside instructor, somebody that teaches courses for whoever, is there a market for that? Because I don't see a lot of that out there.
A market for
Instruct,
outside.
instructor
Instructor
development.
development.
Yeah,
So,
I think that there is, and I think there should be.
I do too. I don't see
And
a
I,
lot of
Yeah.
it. I'm curious about that.
so I actually have two courses that are directly relevant to instructor development. There's the advanced course design, which is instructional design for law enforcement instructors. And I have one called Classroom Command, which David and I have talked about turning into an advanced instructor course according to TCOL standards.
Okay.
And the thing is that I've taught the courses twice in the 5 years I've had them. I think that, so the first problem is that I think that there's different levels of instructor development. I think there's the instructor who is humble enough to know that he's afraid of what he doesn't know. So he's going to seek training across any sphere. If you're a firearms nerd, I was a firearms instructor for a long time. I stopped because you couldn't throw a rock without hitting someone claiming to be a firearms instructor, and I
Right.
just didn't want to get into that competition. Plus, I was out of the field and I hadn't trained in years. But a firearms instructor who goes to other people's firearms instructor courses is only benefiting himself by either validating what he's already teaching as this is what is standard now, or learning that times have moved and then investigating whether or not that's valid or not. So there's a lot of people out there. I was talking with Tactard NPC earlier today. There's a group out there who claim to be training civilian, military, law enforcement firearms training. You watch their videos, you see their pictures, and you're like, where did you learn this? Was it from Warner Brothers Saturday morning cartoons? Because it's totally a joke. They're doing
Yeah.
strange stuff and strange dances in the dark with flashlights. It's like, why do you have a flashlight in your hand when you have a flashlight literally on your freaking weapon that you're pointing into a car? It's just silly stuff like that. And going to courses like that is beneficial because now you get to learn the stupid stuff that people are doing that you can address in your courses. But you can also see where people are going wrong because they might have gone to bad training and fix it. Or you go to a Matt Pranka or a Ben Smith or something like that, or a Ben Stoger even, and you're like, okay, they're doing some really amazing stuff that I can apply. But realizing that not everything they teach might be applicable to your role, but there are pieces that can be taken away. So doing instructor development, I think, is absolutely essential, but it requires something that you find rarely in a lot of law enforcement instructors. And I'd even be willing to say instructors across all industry. They lack
Yeah.
humility. They're unwilling to be wrong. They're unwilling to say, I've been doing this shit wrong the whole time, and I just learned the best way to do it. Now I've got to research it, validate it, get the evidence that shows that I've been wrong and this is the right way. That's what I did with my training. When I learned of instructional design, I was like, holy crap, I got a lot right, but holy crap, I got a lot wrong, and now I know how to fix it. But then
Yeah.
there's the second level of instructor development, which is taking courses that have absolutely nothing to do with your niche interest. Firearms instructors should go off and take case law training, take use of force training, take FTO training courses, take some EVOC. You might never
Mhm.
become an EVOC instructor, but taking those different courses will expand the metaphor and the analogies that you can make for people in your class. Plus, you might learn training techniques that you never would have thought would have applied to your niche interest. That's one of the
Mhm.
things I got from working in the corporate industry, working in law enforcement, military. All these different silos of industries do something different that transfers beautifully to a different industry. I took practical application to corporate world, and they were blown away. It was like bringing a lighter to the Amazonian tribes. They're like, oh my gosh, what is this magic? But then there are things that the corporate world were doing that applied to law enforcement. Not everything, but you have to know your industry enough and your niche interests enough to recognize the bits and pieces that apply. The problem that we have with instructor development is, number one, a lack of humility. People are unwilling to be wrong, unwilling to be uncomfortable. And that's something that we've talked about, and we've seen a recent post about that, is people
Yeah.
have to be willing to be uncomfortable to learn. And then they have to be willing and intelligent enough to be able to say, this applies, this doesn't, and this will work when this won't work in this situation. So I absolutely 100% agree. Jamie says it very well too. You have to be a student to be a good instructor. If you're not learning, if you're not constantly seeking new knowledge, if you're not constantly challenging what you know, you have no business in the learning industry. You have no business being an
Mhm.
instructor. And I'm
Yeah.
pretty passionate about that.
Yeah. I
Well,
can
I think
tell.
Just
too.
going off that,
Okay.
sorry, what you were
Real,
talking about there, Chris, or sorry, Rick, as well, is 100% agree that it needs to be a thing, but you run into the same problem as the rank and file guys, the guys that aren't instructors, is getting the instructors that are there to bite off on going to these things, right? Because they live in this bubble, they know it all, that type of stuff, right? So finding those same instructors to bite off on an instructor development course or whatever the case may be and change their ways as well is just as hard as getting your regular guys on the
Yeah.
patrol to change for the better. It's the same fight.
I think going off of what Rick said too, going to different classes that you don't necessarily know a whole lot about,
Yeah.
one of the greatest things you can do in those is learn how to be a better instructor. Listen to how the instructor teaches. And I've gone to other classes and I've learned, okay, I love the way that they teach this. I love the way that they set this up. And now I can apply that, even though this topic has nothing to do with what I'm trying to teach. But now I can learn how to be a better instructor like these people and apply it to how I'm doing it.
Very good. I
Yeah,
like that.
I learned so much out of Rick's course when I was there with him. I was like, hey, I thought I was doing pretty good, and then he opened up this book, and I was like, holy crap, let's change a lot of the things that I'm doing now.
Wait till he evaluates one of your courses.
Yeah, that's what I'm waiting for.
Here's an interesting thing that I was thinking about. I had an expectation of the max number of books that I'll ever sell. I have that book, Creating Training for Law Enforcement. Let's say there's 780,000 law enforcement in the United States. Let's say that 10% of them are law enforcement instructors. And out of that 10%, I expect that the ceiling for selling my book would be 7,800 books, because 1% of that 10% might be interested in improving
Yeah,
the ability to create training. And in 5 months I've had this book out, I've sold almost 150. So I think the big problem David and Jamie have pointed out, especially David, is that the same 70% who don't care as cops, 70% of instructors don't care. And Chris Palmer has said there's
Yeah.
10% of hard chargers, there's 10% of you're never going to reach them, and 80% who just want to meet the standard, get their check, and go home.
Yeah.
Same thing applies to instructors. So we have a very low percentage of instructors who are going to be actively seeking. I count myself fortunate that my circle includes most of those dudes. The 80%, I piss off because I push their standards. They're the ones that say things like, there was no value in this course whatsoever. I saw you falling asleep. You didn't understand it. You were bored. That's not a me problem. But we're always going to face those numbers. So we focus on the 10% who want that. And that's what the whole purpose of my page, of these lives and having people like you on, is to show that there are people doing this who are motivated. Contact us and we freaking lift. We're the tide
Yeah.
of change, and we're going to lift all the boats that want to change. The ones that don't, let them sink, let them drown, get them out.
Yeah.
But
Good.
Chief, going
Good
back
stuff.
to your original question, I know you're involved with the TTPOA training side of the house. How much do you think there's a potential market in that instructor development stuff, or do you see everyone wants to sign up for the cool guy shit? Do you see that want from that side of the house for those types of courses?
That's a good question. I don't know, a couple years ago, I mentioned to Matt Little that he should look at doing an instructor development course on the firearms side. At that time, I didn't see a lot out there in the field doing on that. And a lot of that is just taking the what you get from T Cole and just the normal stuff, and actually having some more advanced aspects to the principles of shooting the pistol, which you don't typically get in a lot of the T Cole stuff. To answer your question, yeah, I do see a market for it. That's not tested though. I have no way of knowing if there really is, but in my mind, I would say, yeah, there is a market for that. But what that looks like for a general instructor development program or firearms specific instructor development program could be open to further discussion. But yeah, I do. I think there's a market for it and a need. So
Let's make it happen.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to get with you more on that for sure. Be happy to.
It's something that David and I have talked about, is that advanced instructor course. We're going to put it on this year. We don't know what the market for it's going to be, but it's going to be a course that I've seen people say, hey, you should put on a 2-week course for this kind of thing. We've got stuff coming.
Gotcha. Cool.
Real quick, we have a question from Nate Hubert. I don't know if he's still on or not. How would you recommend balancing putting on advanced training that would benefit the smaller group of officers who actually train versus putting on more basic training that the masses still need since they don't train?
Yeah, that's actually come up in discussion. I think, to me personally, I think you have to separate them. You have to separate the level of intensity on certain things. I do a performance handgun class. That's not necessarily the thing that I would do for lower level, more basic shooters, because you're getting into different stuff at that level. But yeah, I think the way to balance it is to separate it on some level. If you've got a group that's more advanced on a subject, they're going to be looking for a different thing out of that training than somebody that's just trying to figure out how to hold the pistol, just using the firearms instruction as a piece of that. You've got more work to do at one level. Still have work to do at another level, but I think the expectation of the student is a little different. And I've seen that in classes I've done where you've got people that are pretty advanced, they're pretty good at the skill, and we're working through things that not that level really at that point. And you have to worry about whether they're getting anything out of that or they're getting bored, that kind of stuff. But I would say that the separate those two would be how I would approach it in terms of balancing it.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple different ways to do it. I love teaching classes where I have high level dudes and I have brand new guys or guys
Yeah.
that don't even want to be there, because now it tests me as an instructor. How do I make this course work for everybody? And how do I get the high speed guys to get something out of it, but then also raise the level of the lower class people, and not the lowest class, but the lower
Yeah.
skilled people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that's on the instructor. And I think also too, you do have to separate it at some point too. And it goes back to making yourself available as an instructor. We have regular training for the department, quarterly training, whatever, that you put everybody through. But then you got the hard chargers. We have a group of probably 20 or 30 guys now that call us all the time. Hey, can you put us through this training next week? And so we make
Yeah.
ourselves available to put them through that training and give them the ability to now do what we did with everybody, but now a little bit more advanced, a little bit more high speed. so that
Sure.
they feel they get something out of it.
Yeah. I like that. It's good.
One of the things I've found too, and if you have mixed, not all training can be split out to advanced, and using the term advanced can be
Right.
problematic because what is really
Sure.
advanced?
I
Is
know.
it advanced skills? Is it advanced like new tactics that build on old tactics? But one of the things, and I learned this in my 2 minutes in the Marine Corps, is that if you have really advanced people, let's say if you have people with higher skill sets mixed in with people with lower skill sets, you can, I just totally spaced what I was going to use. You can have those higher skill set people mentor the lower skill
Hmm.
set people and become a
Yeah.
force multiplier for instruction. It also starts building that leadership component where the higher skilled people have to develop some humility, some patience, and learn how to be instructors as well as leaders and taking care of that. I never had experienced that until I was in Marine Corps basic training. I set the company record for breaking down an M16A2. And because I had done that, I was put in charge of the 8 guys who were making M16s at some kind of weird art. It's like, so I was pleased with having all 7 of the 8 pass their first phase testing. The last one, I think he was just trying to get out of the Marine Corps because he was doing some crazy stuff at finding ways of putting charging handles in parts of the M16A2 that I almost felt like we needed to call a detective for some kind of sexual assault. But it was a really good lesson though of using your advanced people, and I think that goes towards the promotion conversation
Yeah.
too.
And the
Is
mentorship.
Yeah.
who in your agency are creating better officers? Those are the guys I want to be my sergeants. Not the guy
Yeah.
who can test, not the guy who's going to all the barbecues at the sheriff's house or the chief's house, but the guy who's quietly improving the guys around him. And
I
that
agree.
I think that maybe like some kind of peer nomination for promotions would be helpful too. But all of it is problematic. But it all comes down to instruction.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, good point. Good point. I was thinking that too as the discussion before you said that was one way to balance that would be to take advantage of the higher skill set and use them as coaches. And it depends on what type of training you're doing, but I also agree with you. I don't really like the term advanced, but like it with a lot of this stuff, it's just skill development. It's not. So
Yeah. If anybody has anything to add to that, I have another question from Sidewinder 1577. What do you all feel about 1 to 2 year officers going up for and getting instructor positions? I have a very specific opinion about that, but I want to hear from y'all first.
go ahead. I think, to my perspective, it depends on what skill level they have. But I would say experience does matter when it comes to getting into teaching other officers how to do a skill or whatever. But that being said, I will say that I would rather have a 2-year person as an instructor that's super passionate, willing to do the work, is a learning person versus somebody that's an 8-year experienced person that's just going to get in there and kick his feet up on the desk. So it depends. I think
Yeah.
probably most places would have a 2-year limit before you could submit for to transfer into that type of assignment. But this kind of goes back to the selection piece and the selection discussion that you guys have brought up is it really depends on their skill set and their personality, their willingness to be a coach, a mentor, learning like that continuous learning to develop that skill. I have very strong opinions on the firearm side as it pertains to this, more so than anything because that's the area that I've spent most of my career in as an instructor. So I guess to be lame about it, I would say it depends. Depends
I
on
agree with that as well. It's one
yeah,
of those things like, do they have the skill set to teach it? But there does need to be some level of buy-in from who they're teaching as well.
correct.
So
Yeah,
they're fresh out of the academy. They're not going to get that same respect from the guys that they're teaching because they don't have that buy-in to the
yeah.
uh, to the job, so to speak.
But
But yeah,
to that point, that 20-year guy that's an
oh
instructor that doesn't have the skill doesn't
yeah,
get that same buy-in. It's a
agreed.
balance. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, it totally depends. If you get a guy that comes through the academy that's a grandmaster USPSA, there's no reason why I wouldn't want that guy teaching firearms after a year on the street or something.
Yeah.
I know a kid recently that was helping out at the range who's almost a GM, and I would
Yeah.
learn from this guy all the time. Any day, I want to learn from this guy. Only a 2-year officer, and he was told because he doesn't have his AZ Post instructor
Yeah.
course, they're not going to go let him teach. And I'm like, why not? I want to learn from that guy. And I think we hold people back like that too, that you didn't get this instructor
Yeah.
cert, so you can't go do it, but you're already at that level. So I think
Yeah.
it really depends. Like, what is your background? Where's your receipts from what you've done before? And then people get the buy-in once you show them that you can do the task that you're teaching.
Yeah. I can tell you that Arizona instructor cert is probably a much easier box to check than his Grandmaster card was. So,
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So
And his
I have,
grandmaster didn't come with a red shirt.
he probably was just wearing
yeah.
shorts and a t-shirt,
Yeah.
probably a Valor t-shirt.
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
he's got one.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I have a very specific opinion about that because I am that guy.
Mhm.
I was told I was going to general instructor course. I was told I was going to be an FTO after 8 months of independent patrol. And part of it was because of the work I did in New York City in 2001. But also, when they told me I was going to these classes, I was like, are you sure? Because policy is 2 years. So, like, we can make exceptions to policy when we see the value of it. They chose me. I didn't really talk about my background, but by then I'd already been a firearms instructor for 8 years. I'd already taught at higher education and trade schools and multiple things. And they had just been watching and seeing how I interacted with everybody else. And they would see me take the people who had come out after me, how I'd spend time working with them on doing their reports, or I would show up to back up and I would give them advice on stuff. So they were paying attention, they were watching, and I was nominated by a couple of the sergeants that had me in FTO about my professionalism and my understanding of stuff. Plus, I had a lieutenant that called me Deputy Chaos because I would get the weird stuff that nobody else knew what to do with. I would show up and I would handle it, and I would handle it in a way that they never expected. So I was made an instructor, and I was embarrassed by that because I knew there were a lot of guys who were like, who do you think you are being an instructor? I'm like, I didn't ask for this. I didn't immediately throw myself out there as I'm the knower of all things. I only taught at the academy when I was with other instructors who had been doing it for years and understood law enforcement better than I did. I understood teaching, I understood learning, I understood how to write course material, which is what my main contribution was. But for the first couple of years, I did not consider myself the lead instructor. But that's because of the type of instructor I am, is that I am afraid of what I don't know, and I don't want to be giving people misinformation, and I don't want to put people in danger if I get something wrong. That's it. So while I think having 2 years on the road is a good idea for somebody before they teach law enforcement specific stuff, it's also why I talk about the need for an apprenticeship program, which I think might be an answer for promotions too. If you want to be a sergeant, maybe there should be an apprenticeship program for learning how to be a sergeant, and it goes through a selection process, just like I talk about instructors. If you want to be an instructor, go through an apprenticeship program first, show that you have the dedication, the passion, and the interest in continuing to learn before you go to that instructor certification course. And
Yeah.
there are multiple ways of handling that. So I hate the arbitrary numbers of you must be in this role for 5 years, because you could say you've been a cop for 5 years and worked a desk for 4.5 of them, or you could have worked 5 years in a gang infested high crime area. Whose experience matters at that point if it's just 5 years of experience?
Yeah. Yeah, we put a lot of emphasis on years of experience in this profession and not enough emphasis on actual skill set to do that job or do the next level. I got to run here in a minute, fellas.
Yeah, we usually try to keep it to an hour. We're super grateful that you spent another extra 40 minutes with
You
us.
bet, man. I loved it. Yeah.
We could talk for hours with you, man. It's your wealth of knowledge, your insight. I wish you had more of a platform, and anything we can do to lift your platform and get your name out there, you just let us know. We're totally in for that.
Sounds good. I appreciate it.
Great to meet you,
Absolutely.
man.
Nice meeting you.
Thank everybody who asked questions. Thank you, Bryan Williams, Chief Bryan Williams, for coming on with us for a second time. And we'll see y'all next week.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thank you.